The day you become successful, the people around you don't change. Their behavior does. And most people don't even notice it's happening. Imagine two versions of yourself. Same personality, same intelligence, same sense of humor. The only difference, one has $500 in the bank, the other has $5 million. Now answer honestly. Would strangers treat them the same? Would friends? Would family? Would potential business partners? Deep down, you already know the answer. Most people like to believe respect is earned through character alone. Reality is more complicated. Psychologists have spent decades studying how status changes human behavior, and the results are uncomfortable. Because many of the people who admire you tomorrow are the same people who ignored you yesterday. But here's the strange part. People rarely wake up one morning and decide, I'm going to respect rich people more. Their brains often make that decision before they even realize it. Imagine you're interviewing two strangers for the same job. Both have identical experience, identical qualifications, even identical interview answers. Now imagine, before making your final decision, someone casually tells you, by the way, this person built a company worth several $million. Nothing about their skills has changed, but something inside your brain has. Suddenly, they seem more competent, more trustworthy, more impressive. Psychologists call this the halo effect, a term first introduced by psychologist Edward Thorndike back in 1920. It's a well-documented cognitive bias where one positive quality, such as success or status, causes people to assume someone also possesses other positive qualities like intelligence, leadership, or honesty. In other words, our brains often fill in the blanks without evidence. Think back to school. Remember that student nobody paid much attention to until they suddenly became successful years later? Now everyone wants to reconnect. People say, I've always believed in you. But have they? Or did your success simply change the story they tell themselves? Success doesn't just change your bank account. It changes the lens through which people see you. And that's where things become dangerous. Because once people start treating you differently, it's easy to forget who respected you before you had anything to offer. But here's the question that matters. Do people actually respect you? Or do they respect what they think you can do for them? There's a big difference, and most people never notice it. Imagine you walk into a room wearing a cheap t-shirt and old sneakers. Nobody knows your name. You're just another person. Now imagine walking into that same room with the same clothes, but everyone already knows you built a billion-dollar company. Nothing about your appearance changed, nothing about your personality changed, yet somehow the room feels different. People smile first, they listen more carefully, they laugh harder at your jokes. Your opinions suddenly carry more weight. What changed? Not you, their expectations. Social psychologists have studied this for decades. One of the strongest findings in psychology is that people's expectations influence how they perceive others. When someone is already seen as successful or high status, observers are more likely to interpret the same behavior as confidence, leadership, or intelligence, rather than as arrogance or luck. Your words haven't changed, the lens through which people hear them has. Think about this. If an unknown entrepreneur says, I have a crazy business idea, people might smile politely. If Elon Musk says the same sentence, headlines appear around the world. The sentence isn't more intelligent, the speaker has more status, and status changes attention. But status doesn't only change strangers. Sometimes it changes the people closest to you. Friends who once ignored your advice suddenly ask for your opinion. Relatives who rarely called start checking in more often. Old classmates send messages saying, we should catch up sometime. It's easy to believe they've all changed. Sometimes they have. Sometimes your success simply made you more visible. But here's where success becomes dangerous. Because the moment everyone starts saying yes to you, you lose something far more valuable than money. Honest feedback. History is full of leaders, celebrities, and business owners who slowly surrounded themselves with people who agreed with everything they said. Not because every decision was brilliant, but because power makes disagreement uncomfortable. The more successful you become, the harder it can be to know who's being honest and who's simply protecting their own interests. That's why many of the world's most respected investors and founders deliberately keep a small circle of people who are willing to challenge them. Because real respect doesn't always sound like agreement. Sometimes it sounds like an uncomfortable truth. So, how do you know whether someone respects you or simply respects your success? The answer usually appears the moment your success disappears. Imagine a young entrepreneur. For years, his phone never stopped ringing. Friends wanted advice. People invited him to expensive dinners. Business opportunities appeared every week. Everyone wanted to know him. Then his company failed. Not overnight, but slowly. The headlines disappeared. The invitations stopped. Even the people who once called him a genius became strangely quiet. What changed? Not his character, not his intelligence, only his status. This is one of the hardest lessons successful people learn. Some relationships are built on who you are. Others are built on what you have. And from the outside, they often look the same. Ask yourself one uncomfortable question. If tomorrow you lost your job, your savings, and your social status, who would still answer your phone call? Those people are your real wealth. Psychologists call this social capital. Unlike money, social capital isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in trust, loyalty, and genuine relationships. Research in psychology has consistently shown that strong social connections are among the strongest predictors of long-term well-being and life satisfaction. Ironically, many people spend decades chasing financial wealth while quietly neglecting the relationships that make wealth meaningful. But there's another danger, and it's even more subtle. Success doesn't only change how other people see you, it changes how you see yourself. When strangers admire you, it's tempting to believe every compliment, every headline, every round of applause. Slowly, your identity becomes attached to your success. And that's a dangerous place to live, because if your identity depends on your achievements, every setback starts feeling like a personal failure. That's why some of the world's most successful people still struggling with insecurity. Not because they don't have enough, but because they're terrified of losing the version of themselves that everyone else admires. True confidence isn't built on applause, it's built on knowing who are you when nobody is clapping. And that's a kind of wealth no market crash, no failed business, and no bank account can ever take away. So, does money really change people? Sometimes, but more often, it reveals them. Think back to the beginning of this video. We imagined two versions of the same person. Same personality, same intelligence, same character. The only difference was money. Now, you know something most people never realize. Money doesn't magically create respect. It creates perceived value. And perceived value changes the way people behave. Some people see opportunity. Some see status. Some see influence. Very few still see the person. That's why wealth can feel surprisingly lonely. The more successful you become, the harder it becomes to answer one simple question. Would this person still be here if I had nothing? And the truth is, you may never know, unless life forces you to find out. But here's something successful people eventually discover. The goal isn't to make everyone respect you. That's impossible. The goal is to build a life where the opinion of the wrong people stops controlling your decisions. Because chasing admiration is a game you can never win. The more people who praise you, the more you'll fear disappointing them. And that's not freedom. That's another prison. Real respect is different. It doesn't arrive because of your car, your watch, your salary, or the number in your bank account. Real respect grows slowly from your integrity, your consistency, the promises you keep, the way you treat people when they have nothing to offer you. Ironically, those qualities often attract more genuine respect than wealth ever could. Money is powerful. It can open doors, create opportunities, and completely change the course of your life. But if your self-worth depends on how people treat you after you become successful, you've handed strangers control over your happiness. Build wealth, absolutely. But build something even harder, a character that doesn't become bigger when you succeed and doesn't become smaller when you fail. Because at the end of the day, your bank account can tell people how much money you have, but only your character tells them who you really are. If this documentary made you see success from a different perspective, subscribe for more psychology documentaries that challenge the way we think. And before you go, answer this in the comments. Have you ever noticed people treating you differently because of your money, your job, or your success? I'd genuinely like to hear your experience. And in the next documentary, we're going to explore a question that affects almost everyone: why smart people avoid luxury. You might never look at expensive things the same way again.